Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck. And of course, that means some smart talk radio is once again in your future. And this segment, certainly no exception. Extraordinary story that we have for you in this segment. It's about all kinds of things. But we're going to be talking to Joanne Renfro. Joanne is a local commercial artist and painter as well. She also does a little bit of hiking, and she has hiked and forged the wonderful Appalachian National Scenic Trail, also known as the Appalachian Trail, or I believe to insiders, it's also simply known as the AT. It is 2,200 miles of really, really rugged, but all kinds of terrain. From the state of Georgia all the way up to the state of Maine, but we'll let Joanne talk more about that in just a second. I also want to remind you, of course, all of the shows are archived, at least going back to 2013 anyway, last two full years, on YouTube. You simply go to YouTube and type in Lewis at Large Radio, and you can access each segment by the guests themselves. Also, of course, check us out on the web at lewisatlarge.com. But anyway, time now to talk to Joanne Renfro. Joanne, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great.
Good. Well, let's talk. People may be familiar, probably are familiar by now, with the movie Wild, starring Reese Witherspoon, and a trek that she did, but somewhat similar to what you did. But first of all, what motivated and what was the thought process behind Joanne Renfro wanting to hike the 2,200 miles of the Appalachian Trail?
Well, probably about 10 years ago, I read Bill Bryson's book, A Walk in the Woods, which is kind of the first time I'd heard of the Appalachian Trail, but I didn't really know what it was. And so that sort of piqued my interest, but I still had kids at home and things to do, so just sort of put it on the back burner. And then about 2 years ago, I was talking to a friend and was mentioning that was something I'd like to do, and it kind of occurred to me that, wait a minute, my kids are out of school, nobody's graduating, nobody's getting married next year, so there was my window, and so just started working towards making it happen, financially and logistically, and it worked out. I got lucky it worked out. I had the support of my family and friends and made it happen.
Now, the whole concept of traveling to hike, traveling to run, traveling to do some kind of an outdoor sportsman-related activity is not new to you. Share with us a little bit some of the travels you've had.
Well, I'm a runner, so I've gone all over the place to run. I have a close group of friends that for the last 13 or so years we've gone usually somewhere in the United States and done more like a day hike, not backpacking, but we've done day hikes all over the country and tried to hit some different national parks. So I love hiking. I knew I loved being outdoors. I had never backpacked before, as I mentioned. So that was new. Getting all that gear that I needed and just carrying everything I had on my back was a new thing. But, I just kind of thought I could probably do it and would enjoy it just because I like being outside. So
you were going to, over the course of time, prepare yourself to hike 2,200 miles. Okay. Which is longer, I would think, than Kansas City to San Francisco. But over, how many different states is it? Is it 12?
14. 13, 14. No, gosh, I went blank. 14 states.
Okay. Georgia, North Carolina,
states.
Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. So the preparation for that is different, obviously, than preparing for a marathon, preparing for a sprint, preparing even for a hike down and across the Grand Canyon, I would think. Tell us the first of all, how much training time did you have, or did you feel you need, and was it enough? And tell us the kinds of things and training for all these different kinds of terrain, ranging, I would think, from a city street to a very steep mountain grade. Tell us about that.
Well, I run, like I mentioned anyway, so I'm relatively fit. And then just carrying the backpack I knew was going to be a challenge. And for maybe the month before, I would put on my pack kind of when it got dark and walk around my neighborhood, weight it down with about what I thought I would be carrying. But I didn't do a ton of training with the pack because I sort of figured if I'm going to be out there for 5 months, the first couple of weeks can kind of be the training. So I just wanted to be physically fit, and yet I just figured some of it would come with what I was doing. And so as far as the terrain, the great thing about hiking on the East Coast is even though you're doing big altitude gain. This, like in the in the Rockies, you're doing similar altitude gain. There's no elevation. The highest point on the AT is below 7,000 feet. So you've got plenty of oxygen, which was a huge advantage, I think. The first couple of weeks I got out there, and I didn't feel unprepared at all. I think the biggest preparation for me was the gear. I did a lot of research online and talking to people that had hiked it previously about gear, and, I mean, getting the right pack, kind of the big couple of items that you really need to have right are your pack, your tent, your sleeping bag. I mean, just there's like a few big things that you want to get right, because you want them to fit you right, feel right, keep you warm enough. Because from that you can switch in and out. Shoes were a big one, and so I did a lot of research on that stuff. That was kind of probably more prep than it was just hiking around town with my pack on. So.
Again, if you just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis, from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio, and we are in the midst of an interesting segment with Joanne Renfro. She's a local commercial artist and painter, and very recently enough, has hiked the 2,200 miles of the Appalachian Trail, or the AT, as they call it. Joanne, what about in terms of the strategic planning of this mission, of this hike? Was there never a question that you were going to hike it beginning to end in one shot, or did you consider, don't some people also consider doing parts of it, then leaving, then going back? Tell us about that thought process.
For me, I wanted to do it's called a through hike if you do it all the way in one calendar year, and that was my goal. There's a lot of people who section hike it, because it's not easy for anybody to take 5 months out of their lives. So a lot of people will start Georgia or Maine and, section hike it over a period of years. But yeah, I just wanted to do the through hike, and it's kind of I don't know, can you say crapshoot? It's kind of a crapshoot if you stay healthy, and because if you're young or if you're old or whatever, you're hiking over slippery rocks, through streams, up and down mountains, so there's always the chance that you're going to get hurt or injured. So I felt fortunate that I didn't get injured in anything to keep me from completing it. I am stubborn enough that I kind of thought mentally I could do it, but the mental part is a really huge, huge thing, because a lot of people get, you get cold, you get wet, you're never completely dry, or your muscles are aching every morning when you get up and you have to start doing it again. But for me, I just wasn't going to quit, and I was having the time of my life, even though it was hard and challenging, and I loved it. I loved the people and the trail and everything about it, so...
Well, I certainly want to get into, in this discussion, the mental aspect of it as well as the physical, but also just as a functional matter, for those that are not familiar with the Appalachian Trail, it is, in fact, part of, or is it in and of itself, a national park? Or is it just a national trail?
It's a national trail. I don't think it's considered a national park. I don't know that, but I'm pretty sure it's not. It's just and it's completely volunteer maintained. I mean, it's, like national parks, they have people that work for them. The Appalachian Trail is completely maintained by volunteers. There's trail groups up and down the East Coast that take on a section, and they're responsible for clearing that trail, keeping it maintained. So, which is a pretty amazing thing that 2,200 miles of terrain and trail is maintained by volunteers. It's pretty spectacular.
Well, we've all been on hikes in our lives at some point, and we've been down hiking trails. I'm curious as to, is the trail, first of all, how is it marked? I mean, if I'm walking through woods, I could see maybe things tied to trees or some small signage or whatever, but if I'm part of this, does it not go through towns, cities, and I believe, does it not at one point go through some buildings as well?
It is marked with white blazes. It's 2 by 6 inch white blazes on trees or cement or whatever it happens to be. You happen to be going along. You just look for the white blazes, which is pretty cool. And sometimes they're more obvious. Sometimes they're less obvious. When you're going through New Hampshire, for example, they really space them out. So you could be hiking along for a mile and think, geez, I hope because every once in a while it crosses trip paths with another trail. So you have to be sure you're on the right trail. But in New Hampshire, they aren't great about positioning them. So you're hiking along thinking, I sure hope I didn't get off on another trail. And then eventually you'll see another white blaze. And it does go through towns, and a lot of times then it'll be you look down the sidewalk and you'll see a white blaze, or up on a telephone pole. It doesn't really go through buildings. It does go through, like, across the Dartmouth campus in Hanover, New Hampshire, down the main street of, like, Hot Springs, North Carolina, and Damascus, Virginia, and which is kind of cool. And all those towns along the trail are incredibly supportive. Hanover in particular, they're just incredibly supportive of the hikers coming through town, and which is a pretty cool, another aspect of the trail. The people, not just the hikers and the townspeople that embrace you too, are pretty amazing.
Okay, so again, particularly with the advent of online, I'm sure there was lots of pre-hiking research you could do and learn about the various communities or areas you were going to be walking through on your way. But I am curious, at any one time along the trail, are you by yourself most of the time, or are you running into other people, or people walking, instead of you're going south to north, you're seeing people walking north to south? What about the exchange with other human beings along the way?
That's kind of one of the great things about it. You can be as alone or in a group as you want to be. I enjoyed hiking by myself sometimes, so during the day, I didn't really love sleeping alone at night, so I only did that a couple times. But if you want to be near people, you can be near people. If you want to be on your own, there was a couple times I remember getting to a mountaintop and stopping for lunch and having this incredible view and being all by myself, and it was just amazing because, how many people get to do that. I just felt very fortunate. But then I made some really great lifelong friends out there, too, so we would hike together. Sometimes we were right together. Sometimes we were a little bit apart, but, we might plan on being the same place at night and camp out together. And the camaraderie at night with all the people you run into, and everybody's swapping stories about what happened that day. And so it's kind of whatever you want it to be.
Okay, so you could be walking with a group. You could be by yourself for a day, 2, 3, 4 days, maybe, I would assume. And then other times you might be walking with 10 to 15 other people possibly along the trail, correct?
Well, not necessarily. 10 to 15 would be a stretch. I mean, I had the most I probably ever really hiked was 4 of us possibly together, and even then you'd get kind of split up during the day. So because really 10 to 15 people in a day is about what you would see maybe on it. And there were days when you would go along and you'd see 3 or 4 other people, and you're thinking, it's kind of like, where is everybody? And then all of a sudden you'd come to a spot and there would be 15 to 20 people. So it's just kind of you could be a half mile ahead or a half mile behind somebody and not see them, for weeks, months, days, just because if you're kind of moving at the same pace and you don't know it. So.
Right. So again, remind us again, what were the dates tell us over what period of time you did the hike?
I left Springer Mountain in Georgia on March 19th, which is coming up, my year anniversary of leaving, which I can't believe, and kind of makes me a little bit sad just to think that was a year ago. And then I finished at the top of Mount Katahdin in Maine on August 24th.
Wow, so that's a full 6 months.
Yeah, it was 5 months and 5 days is what it took me. So,
Joanne, Joanne, was it about the amount of time you thought it would take? Were you on some kind of a goal, or tell us about that one?
It was about the time I took. I wanted to shoot for 5 months, and that's about what I did. There's people who do it faster, and there's people who take 6 months. I mean, 6 months is kind of an average, I think. So to do 5 months, you have to average about 15 miles a day, which is approximately what I did.
The world that is tied to cell phones and computers and online and television and electronics and even a space heater, that must have sounded like a luxury to you. I'm curious, at the time, do you find a lot of people bemoaning the fact they can't communicate? Or these people that are out there specifically to sort of get away from it all, and they love every minute of it, I would think?
Most people love every minute of it. Since everybody's out there, obviously, for different reasons. I wasn't really trying to escape anything. I just wanted to challenge myself and experience something new. And you have, cell service intermittently up and down the trail, so it's nice you could be in touch and keep everybody informed that you were safe and everything was going okay, and we could touch base and know what was going on at home. But yeah, you're tuned out. I mean, like the news, I didn't watch the news. I used to be kind of a CNN junkie before I left, and really got out of touch with the news. And when I got back, since I've been back, I just don't watch as much news because I try to keep current on what's going on in the world, but I guess I just feel like I don't need to know every little thing anymore. So my TV's off a lot more than it was before I left.
What about, I'm just curious about, what about your real life back home? What were the kind of things that you had to do in preparation to, because I know that you work regularly. I'm curious what you had to do for make those arrangements so you could leave for 5 months.
I have a lot of, clients and people that I've worked with for years, and, they knew I was going to be gone, so they were patient. And, I would every once in a while get touch, hear from a new client, somebody that, and I would, let them know what I was doing and what was going on. And, because working for myself, I have to, and I have to have an income. So most people were pretty patient about, that's great that you're doing that. When you get back, give us a call. So when I got back, I was fortunate in that I stepped back into my house, my job. I have great friends here, and I was lucky. A lot of people sold everything, put everything in storage. And I knew one guy that did that, sold everything he had, quit his job, put everything in storage, and he lasted 2 weeks on the trail. So,
oh, boy.
Yeah.
Oops. Hey, Joanne, a couple things here. Number one is along the way, were there logical, or where from time to time could you find like sort of way stations or what would be logical sort of camping areas that were either maintained by these volunteer groups or that the previous hikers had just sort of established, and were those sort of well known where you could stop, or did you just stop wherever you stopped and you camped right there?
There's a book that is put out that pretty much lines out. It's a great book. It tells you. Water is a huge issue on the trail. You have to stay hydrated, and we all carried filters. So the book would tell, we knew if we were coming up to a stream that where we could get some water to filter, or there's also average every 8 miles there are shelters, which are just kind of a 3-sided wood structure to get out of the rain that you can stay in, and those were marked in the book. So we knew we would come up to them. I kind of avoided sleeping in the shelters because there's a lot of mice. And where there's a lot of mice, there's a lot of black snakes that like to eat the mice. So I preferred my tent at night and the privacy of my tent. So sometimes we stayed near the shelters. A lot of times we would just hike along, and it was called stealth camping when you just
right.
You've gone about as far as you want to go, and you're like, okay, this looks like a good spot. There's flat spots for tents, and we'd throw them up and sleep there.
What about, again, and we've talked about all kinds of stuff on this show. What about just seriously all the biological things, necessities of the human body, all those things? Are there areas for that, or you just learned how to do it just kind of on your own out in the rugged wild?
You kind of learn how to do it. By the shelters, there's usually like an outhouse. And other than that, when you're just out on your own, you just kind of find a spot. You want to be environmentally friendly, so usually you go in the woods and dig a hole and do whatever you need to do, and then you move on. So
what about the hikers they're very much many times miles and miles away from anything remotely considered civilization. You have bugs, as you mentioned, you have snakes, you've got probably poison ivy, poison oak, all those various things, let alone lightning, rain, snow, everything else. Seriously, looking back on it, sort of do a risk assessment, if you would. How dangerous is it out there?
Honestly, I never felt in danger. I feel like if you use your head, there was not many days where we had to alter our plans because of weather. But when we got to New Hampshire and we were going to be going across like this Franconia Ridge where it's wide open, you're above tree line the whole way, and there were big storms coming in. So we took when you take a day off from hiking, it's called a zero because you're not making any forward progress. So we took a zero in New Hampshire because we didn't want to be going across the ridge through a thunderstorm. And then there was another day, 4th of July, when there was a thunderstorm and we weren't so intelligent, and we hiked up over a mountain through the storm. But when you're out there, it's kind of like you do what you got to do. We're here. There's nowhere to go inside, so we just kept moving, and we eventually got to a shelter. And actually, it was ended up being a funny, fun, challenging day. But yeah, you just have to use your head, and so I don't feel like it's that dangerous.
Were there particular, and again, I know you've got lots and lots and lots of memories, but was there a particular incident, particular day, or a period that stands out to you as your favorite, so to speak? And is there one, other than what you just described, that you would not want to do again?
Not really. There's just so many little snippets of times. The last 1,000 miles, I ended up meeting a gal named Murphy. She lives in Florida. And she's 20 years younger than I am, which is interesting because age really isn't really an issue out there. I mean, you're friends with people who are 21, friends with people who are older than you, or there's not that many older than me. But so we hiked together off most of the last 1,000 miles and just laughed a lot and had a lot of fun. And she will be a lifelong friend. So I don't know. I can't think of any. I mean, there's tons of one incidents, but they're all little snippets of just, funny things that happened. And, just good, warm memories. And
you kind of touched on this briefly, but if we came down and we plucked out at random any day 100 hikers along the Appalachian Trail, what would they have in common? And male versus female, young versus old, first big hike, experienced hiker, give us a sense of kind of the demographics, so to speak, of those hikers.
Age-wise, it's mostly kids who are younger kids, like 20, maybe right out of college age, that age, trying to figure out what they want to do next with their lives. And then not so much of the 30 to 40-year-olds because they're working and raising their families, but then the close to retiree type or retired, there's that group. So there's kind of a wide expanse of people. And men to women, I would say, I read somewhere statistically it was maybe 25% women, 75% men, although I would be kind of surprised if it were that high. To me, it seemed like there were a lot less women out there. But again, you don't really have an advantage being younger, older, male, female. It's all just, your body, how physically fit you are, mental toughness. I mean, nobody really has... it's not like a sport where you're obviously at an advantage when you're younger because your physical ability is different. Because it's just, I think what the younger folks had on us as far as their younger bodies, we had a little bit more life experience, so we could maybe tough out some of the stuff better than them. So it kind of even the playing field, I think.
Well, Joanne, as we start to kind of wind down here a little bit, you spent lots and lots of time with Joanne Renfro. And I'm curious as to kind of maybe sort of in a personal nature, you learned you could do it physically. Did you find yourself, or what did you come away with in terms of what Joanne Renfro is really all about? Did that change? Did your self-image change at all? And did it change your outlook maybe about the rest of your life going forward?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I got from there was the incredibly good people that we encountered, and I think that's a good thing. You meet these people who are hiking or supporting the trail, and it makes you want to be a better person. So that was one thing. The simplicity. I mean, I literally had one outfit that I wore during day and one outfit to put on at night so I would be dry, and that was it, day in and day out. So you just learn, and food, it was just all very simple, and I loved that about it. And so I wanted to incorporate that back into my life when I got home. I wanted to keep things simple, keep perspective on what was really important and what wasn't. I think that's probably the biggest thing is just you come back wanting to be a better person and keeping it simple and knowing what's important in life.
So if we come to your house for dinner, we're going to have it on a campfire out back, or do you still have a microwave?
I still have a microwave. People asked me when I got home if I was going to be sleeping on the floor in my house or out in the backyard, and I was like, heck no, I'm going to be in my big soft, cushy bed because I did that.
Where it's dry. Well,
exactly.
It's a wonderful story. Joanne Renfro, local artist, who took 5 months and 5 days, I believe, to hike the Appalachian Trail from northern Georgia all the way up to Maine. Extraordinary adventure. Joanne, I know that you have spoken to various groups about this, but how could people find out more about your adventure and a little bit more about what it's all about? Well, I did a blog as I hiked, and I pretty much blogged every day, kind of for my
personal, so I could remember it, and then so my family could keep up with me. And it's joerenfro.blogspot.com, and it's got tons of photos, tons of stories. So yeah, it's probably the best way to really get the whole gist of the trail.
Okay, so that's Joe Renfro .blog.com.
blogspot.com.
Got it. Well, listen, it begs the question too as we wrap up here. What's the next big hike or next big physical activity? What are you going to do? Run around the world, or what are you going to do?
Well, yeah, oh sure. No, the PCT, which is what Wild was about, I would love to do that. And then there's a trail called the CDT, which is the Continental Divide Trail. And if you do those three trails, AT, CDT, and PCT, it's called the Triple Crown, and only about 300 people have ever done it. So even though that's a long, shot goal, because I've got to work and have real life and all that stuff, that would be a huge goal, just because I think it would be cool to do something that so few people have done, and I love doing it. So,
well, congratulations on completing it, and thank you so much for sharing some of your thoughts and reflections on the trip with us today.
Great. Thanks, Warner.
You bet. We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.